A few days before 2021 turned to 2022, the Marshall Fire broke out in Boulder County, Colorado. And if you're like me, you may have missed it. You know, that was the first holiday season after COVID. There's a lot going on. New Year's Day was just 2 days away. And I got to be honest, I missed it completely. But somebody who didn't miss it was Matt Morris. He was in the middle of it. Matt lost his home in the Marshall Fire. And he decided he was going to do something pretty damn bold. He was going to build back his home by himself. Now, I'm going to let you behind the curtain on this one. I typically like to record these intros after I've spoke with my guest because it helps provide context, right? The conversation, it can go anywhere, and it's fun to reflect on that and to be able to set it up based on what I know. But I'm so excited to talk to Matt that I kind of wanted to set this up a different way. You see, what I'm most intrigued about with Matt's story is both the journey and the destination. Those two things, there's like the old wise tale of it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And if there's a million fake internet quotes, I've seen them from Confucius, the Dalai Lama, Abraham Lincoln. I even think I saw something with Kurt Cobain one time. I could be wrong on that. But the point is within these stories, there's a journey, there's a destination. And with Matt, I'm fascinated by both. Okay. This is a guy who decided, I am going to do this on my own. I asked him, I said, are you your own general contractor? He goes, no, I built the house myself. I said, okay, don't tell me anymore. We got to save it for the air. I got to know what that means. I know he did disaster resilient design, and he prioritized using a lot more concrete than wood. He also made it zero energy. Got to be honest, don't know what that means. Can't wait to find out. And then I can't wait. This is a lot of can't waits, right? I'm very anticipatory about the conversation around how he budgeted, knowing that he didn't really have to pay much outside of materials and himself. So I think we're going to learn a lot through that journey. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't thinking about that destination. You see, where Eaton Fire victims are right now, we're at the beginning of Matt's journey. We're in the trying to figure out how we're going to rebuild our home. Matt rebuilt his. He and his family moved back in. He knows the feeling of losing his house in the fire, all the pain and struggling to get on the right path to building it back. And then he knows what it's like to step through that door when it's done and call it his own. I think about that every single day. Actually, if I'm being honest, I think about it every waking hour. I really do. What is that going to be like? It's kind of like my promised land, right? It's that beacon of hope, that thing that makes me go, okay, it's not great right now. Displacement isn't ideal. I don't love it, but something great is ahead. And I got to understand what that's like from somebody who's lived it. I got to hear about it. I got to know how his kids felt, how it just changed his life. I assume. Now, I could be let down. Maybe it was kind of like, it wasn't as great as I thought. I don't know. But I know he's completed the arc. He's made it to that version of the promised land for himself, this one I dream of for me. And I think a lot of neighbors might be dreaming for them too. And, he's gonna be real. All right. I've had the pre-call with him. He's a cool guy. And I absolutely cannot wait to hear about the journey. I can't wait to hear about the destination. I'm very grateful for his time. And to be honest, as a former English major, I am so grateful that I get to interview a man from Boulder who used more rock than wood in his rebuild with one of the most brazen visions I have heard for building a house. And I get to use a rare triple entendre for our show title. I am Austin LaRoche. This is the Altadena Rebuild, episode 4, Boulder. Matt Morris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Austin. Good to be with you.
All right, so let's start with the Marshall Fire. I admitted in the intro that I kind of missed this. It was right before New Year's 2022, but obviously you did not. What happened in the Marshall Fire, and what was your experience?
Yeah, so it was right before New Year's. It was late December 2021. We were about to go on a vacation, a quick ski trip up in the mountains. Uh, but, we had a little time to kill in the beginning of the day, hanging around the house. We look out the back window and there's a cloud out in the distance. And, we didn't think anything of it. But then it became a little bit more than a cloud after a little bit of time. We hop online and check it out, and sure enough, it's not a cloud; it's a small grass fire. And anyone in the West, we're so used to this that we didn't think anything of that either. And but then it started to get even bigger and bigger and more ominous. And this particular day, there were some high winds, and it seemed like it was starting to come towards our house. We weren't panicking by any means, but what we said was maybe we should get out of here and get going to the ski trip. And so I put a burrito in the microwave for a minute and 45 seconds. And when I hit start, life was normal. And before it beeped, that fire was on us.
Oh
So
my gosh.
that's how fast it came across. There's a large field behind our house. It came across that field probably miles in a matter of seconds. We had over 100-mile-an-hour winds that day, and we had moments to get out. I mean, it was all hands on deck. Let's get
Oh
out
wow.
in the van. Let's get driving through the neighborhood on memory because we couldn't see the curb or the road, and it came
Wow.
fast.
Wow. That's oh my gosh. That's incredible. Sorry, not in the good sense of the word incredible, just like absolutely fascinating how quick that happened. Um, so tell me, so you guys got out and then the whole neighborhood was gone. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So although this at the time the scale of our fire felt pretty catastrophic, it's only 1/10 the size of what you went through. So, first off, I have to say, I feel for everyone out there. I know what you're going through. We went through something similar. I'm very sorry about what happened, and hopefully, at some point in this podcast, we can talk about some hope. Some
Yeah.
silver linings. But yeah, so we got out in a moment's notice. It was the middle of winter in Colorado, nice and cold. Several of my neighbors down the street left without even shoes on, kids in diapers. And we all just left without any warning. There was no warning at all. And my whole neighborhood, which is 170 ish homes, burned down in moments. And all in all, our fire was about 1,000 homes and businesses.
Man, well, as we know from going through it, there's a whole process. Take me through like a little bit of more like a Reader's Digest version of like you've lost your home. How did you get from there to okay, I'm gonna build this thing back and I'm gonna do it myself? What were all those steps like?
It's funny. The Reader's Digest version is very short in this case because I had been thinking about building a house for 20 years. Just based on my background in construction and engineering, it was one of my goals in life, and so I had it in my head that I wanted to do that. And then we also um, had some things we didn't love about the old home, and so we thought
Mhm.
about renovations and things like that. And so it was that evening when we were at my brother-in-law's house, about an hour away, where I was starting to sketch some ideas, and even my daughter, who was 13 at the time, was starting to draw out what her room should look like, and it didn't take us long to start thinking about the next step, and I knew that I wanted to build it for multiple reasons, and so we made that decision rather quickly.
Oh wow, yeah. It's funny because I think kind of similarly. Like I remember being in the first place we were at, displaced, and probably night 3 or 4, and I'm just looking at all these different like house plans on the internet. I'm just like, it's like something that's like, well, wait a minute, this terrible thing's happened to me, but you know what? Like the only way I can make this right is to build something bigger and better and all that stuff. And that's just how my brain works as well. But you said you had something in mind for a while, and you have a background in construction. Tell us a little bit about your background, and then maybe lead up to what you had in mind in terms of the house you wanted to build.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate with my background on the professional side. Just out of dumb luck, really. I started in the Air Force, where one of my jobs as an engineer in the Air Force was disaster preparedness and disaster response. The way that panned out in reality was hurricane response, which isn't apples and apples with a fire response, but there's some similarities. It rhymes pretty heavily. And so some experience there with people losing homes and trying to get them back in a hurry. And then, shortly after leaving the Air Force, I became a general contractor. But I didn't do residential, I did commercial building construction. And, I was fortunate there to see how to build, in my opinion, how to build right when it comes to something that lasts a while, something that's fire resilient and the quality is up. And that's a lot of concrete and steel and resilient materials. I also saw how you could build fast, but at high quality with safety. Went through some really complex jobs too. And so actually building a house feels very manageable after coming off some of those things. And then I also feel really fortunate to understand what matters, where to focus your energy and maybe where to throttle
Mhm.
back and let things ride a little bit. So that's my background. And I was starting to put the wheels in motion to build a small house up in the mountains. I've been saving my allowance for 20 years, to build a house. And we had a lot. I designed the house. I actually had it submitted for review right before our fire here. And I was planning to start building within months after our fire up in the mountains. So I went through that whole process at a nice deliberate pace where I could do a lot of research,
Mhm.
figure out energy efficiency and layouts and everything. And then that was practice. And then the real thing happened where I had to do that and do it quickly.
Wow. And so when you obviously so prepared for this because you had thought through it all, but in looking at your main home and having to rebuild that, I know you talked a lot about concrete and steel. What were the main goals? Like, what do like when you were like, this is what I want out of my next house? What was the big goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and all your listeners are probably thinking the same thing I was, which was fire resilient. That you're not going to trick me again. Um, my family had trauma from it. And I'm sure a lot of folks out there are feeling the same. I wanted my kids to sleep at night. Next time the wind's blowing and there's a high fire danger, I want them to be sleeping entirely through the night. So fire resilience was huge. And for the way that transpired with me was, I'm not going to build out of wood again. Now there are ways to build out of wood and make it highly fire resilient, but for me, uh, with my experience, more so with concrete and steel, less so with wood, I'm building out of concrete. I'm building a bunker. If if I wasn't married, I would have no windows. It would be a true bunker.
Oh,
But
wow.
my wife encouraged us to have some windows and doors. Um, so that was the first thing, of course, was fire resilience. And then I've been thinking a long time about sustainability, building a highly efficient home, energy efficient
Mhm.
home, and surprisingly, which I hadn't thought about it before, they actually go hand in hand. And if we want to get into some of those details, I'm happy to go there. But the concrete structure that I built is also very energy efficient, and so I was starting to think about all electric. Maybe I'll chase a net zero energy, meaning I bring in more electricity than I use using solar panels. Efficient
Mhm.
appliances, those are things that I wanted to try. Now, of course, there's the budget there, which we can talk about that too. But I also wanted a really comfortable house. The way I looked at it, this was my one shot, our one shot. I don't want to do
Mhm.
this again, for our primary home here. So let's put as many bells and whistles in as we can that we can afford. to make this a house we want to live in forever and pass on to our kids, and hopefully they live in it too. Um, and so, we wanted the layout to be nice and functional, and we wanted some fun in it too. I'm a pretty conservative guy. My wife tells me I'm very frugal. But after a fire, your priorities change a little bit, and you want to have a little fun in life. So, yeah, so we injected some niceties in the house as well.
Awesome. So I know when we talked before, you said that your house was zero energy, and I think you just kind of alluded to it. Does that mean that what's that relationship with the solar panels, and what does zero energy actually mean?
So we now have solar panels. When we first moved into the house, we didn't quite have them on there yet. But actually, a year ago, about today, we put them on the house, and we produce X amount of electricity from those solar panels. We also use X amount of electricity throughout the year. Now, sometimes we make more than we use, sometimes we use more than we make, but across the full year, we with the solar panels produce more electricity than we used. And what's interesting is that this is an all electric house. So we're not heating with gas. Everything is electric.
Mhm.
And we have part of that fun thing, we've got the hot tub that we recently put in. And so some big energy hogs. And you just the nature of the orientation of the solar panels and how tight this house is, and the energy efficient appliances and things like that. The combination of all of them made it possible to produce more than we're using.
That's funny you say that. I've had to promise my 11-year-old the one thing that we'll do is we'll add a hot tub to the new house. So that's got
Oh
to go in
yeah,
the budget. Got to go in the
that's the
budget
least.
somewhere.
Yeah, that's the least you can do for an 11-year-old. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, it sounds like you had a great idea of what you wanted out of the house. You have this background in construction to make it happen, and you're building in all concrete. But then I asked you, I was like, so you're your own general contractor. You said, no, I built it myself. Like, what does that mean? And I know you have a background, but how does one just build a house by themselves?
Yeah. So when I say by myself, I was out there, out here. We're speaking from my house now. I was here every single day. Um, I was working. I was also working full time. I'm currently teaching at the University of Colorado. They gave me some nice flexibility, which I appreciate. But I was here definitely every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you can't build entirely as one person. And so I actually hired a couple of students as interns, and they some of them had some background in construction, and some of them didn't, and so they were happy to learn, and I was happy to have them help me out. And so between the two or three of us, we physically built this house, 80% of it. About 20% of it, I did hire some subcontractors, and the things that, quite frankly, I would either screw up or it would take me way too long to do. I hired the expert. Drywall and paint, and a little bit of the plumbing. Yeah, I brought in the big guns for that.
Okay. So I want to talk about budget because if you build this on your own and you may probably have an intern budget, you got a subcontractor budget, but other than that, you had to figure out how much everything cost. So where did you start with breaking down a budget?
Yeah, so again, fortunately, with my background, I've had estimates and cost information for decades on commercial buildings, and that's every part and piece to every component of every system in the building. And so when I was about to go build that house in the mountains, I created a residential home budget, and went out to subs and suppliers, and got price information for every single piece. So thankfully, I already had that template in place, and I knew all the steps along the way, and was able to get refresh pricing by calling suppliers and filling in the blanks. And so that's all the stuff that goes into the building. And then of course you've got a little of the labor when you're hiring it out, and then there's contingency, and we had some insurance, and so I built the budget just like we would in a commercial cost estimate.
Okay. And So you mentioned before, hey, this is it. This is our one shot. We're going to build a house. We're going to have some niceties. Where did you decide, hey, maybe we should splurge a little bit? And where were you like, oh, we can save a lot of money if we do this?
Yeah, so going back to we're going to do this in one shot. We're not going to mess around. First of all, I think we were in the same boat that you and many folks are, where we were severely underinsured. Our community was 92% underinsured, and I'm hearing stories that it's not much different out where you are. So it's a financial disaster, quite frankly. And so we thought, well, if it's going to be a financial disaster, we might as well make it just a little worse and do the things that we really want. So for the most part, we put in things that we wanted. We built it the way we wanted. There were little compromises on pieces that could not change later. So, for example, moving the house, the floor plan, the type of structure, insulation behind the walls, electrical behind the walls, Cat 6 cable behind the, things that if I wanted to do it later, I would be really annoyed at myself that I didn't do it before. So we didn't really compromise much on those type of things. We also didn't compromise on much with something that maybe seemed pricey now, but we knew that over time it would either pay itself back or it would just last a long time and I wouldn't have to replace it. So what that meant for us was, we have a slightly more expensive heating and cooling system here. Mm-hmm. But, the energy bills, it just sips energy, and so over time, when I'm not paying an electric bill, it should pay itself back after, I figure 8 to 10 years. Same with solar panels. They're not exactly cheap, but they'll pay us back after a while. And in materials that are not going to rot, have to be repainted, things like that. So my concrete house, covered with a James Hardy cement fiber siding, that should last a long time. Those are things we splurged on, and it took our budget took a hit because of it. But the hope is that it pays itself back over time.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have a future episode with somebody locally who recently remodeled with James Hardy and was in the middle of the the firestorm and came out okay. So it's clear that some of those materials really do make a difference. So with concrete, did you do concrete flooring as well?
Yeah, so we went all out, which, by the way, this is very, very unique. And when we tried to get subcontractors to help out, they didn't want to, because residential contractors are very used to a certain way of doing it, especially in your local area, right? So we have concrete walls from the footings below ground in the basement all the way to the roof, and every floor in between is concrete. Very thick concrete floors. So, if a fire ends up in our top floor, we've got several layers of concrete between us and the basement. And then the roof is made out of steel. The structure is a steel structure. So we have steel rafters and then a steel deck above that. So we are enclosed entirely by non-combustible material.
Wow. That's incredible. Were there any like early mistakes or wake up calls that you had, and maybe that made you even like question this vision or just reevaluate what it is that was needed?
Yes. So I was used to building this way in commercial, and there are certain products that help you form up concrete that are commercial grade, and they're quite frankly too expensive and they're too hard to build on your own. And so there's kind of like residential light products to build concrete. And so, for example, concrete when you pour it is wet; it can't hold itself, so you have to put it in formwork or a mold until it cures. Normally, that's some sort of wood product or some sort of sheet product that's pretty heavy duty with some steel or aluminum in it. For me, I used foam. So it's foam on both sides, and you end up pouring concrete in it, and it's a little bit precarious, until the concrete sets up. And so that product, along with the product I use for the floor, haven't been used much in combination before. So I feel as though I was kind of breaking some new ground with some of the combinations of things I was doing, and I questioned myself a number of times. Why am I doing this? For example, it took me 3 months to build the structure of the house, the bones of the house. And my neighbor right next door here, it took them 3 days to build out of wood. And, I was absolutely exhausted and filthy. And I look over and they build a floor and a half in a day. And so that, they use prefabricated wood wall panels. And so, yes, that was, that was one time where I was freezing my ass off. And I thought, what am I doing? And
Mhm.
uh, there were a few of those moments along the way, but that was one that was
Mhm.
that comes top to mind.
Was there a period of time where you had to just delay any build because of the weather?
I pushed through as much as I could. We were lucky to get the snowiest, coldest winter on record, or at least in the last several decades. Um, it was a challenging winter, and there were several times where I'm sitting out in my truck, and I'm trying to pump myself up to get out of the truck and start working. But no, I didn't delay it at all. I shoveled more snow off of my house in progress than I would have liked. Because and we kept pushing because we knew that our ALE was running out, as I know yours is and everybody is. So yeah, we just kept pushing.
Wow, I feel like, there's that thing that parents do when you're young. Like I had to walk up hill to school both ways for 5 miles. You guys have it so good. And your poor children are going to have to hear the story about you building a house with your bare hands in under 2 years in the harshest winter you guys have faced in a while, huh?
Yeah, I will hold that trump card until the day I die. Yeah, unless they have something insurmountable to accomplish. Yeah, no, I didn't think about that. I'll be sure to keep using that the rest of their lives.
And how was that for them? Obviously, it sounded pretty traumatic getaway, but did you involve them at all in being able to rebuild things?
I gave them every opportunity to come join me. But I had a teenage daughter at the time. I had a 6-year-old daughter at the time, and quite frankly, it was more than what they probably were interested to do. And my older daughter did come out. She wired all the electrical in her room, so she can.
Mhm.
She's proud of that, and she helped me build several days. Um, but for the most part,
Mhm.
we attempted to have them live their life and get back to something normal.
Yeah, that's really cool though. Just being able to see your parent. What an awesome example you were. Even if they didn't feel as comfortable helping out, I think that you're going to be looked at as pretty awesome the rest of your life for what you did. Um, so along the way, I mean, we've talked about some of the challenges. What was the toughest moment? Tell me about a day when you're like, I don't know if this is even worth it anymore. Like how am I going to go on?
Yeah, I mean, there are 2 days that come to mind. So similar to what I was describing with concrete, not having a form until it cures. We were up on the second floor building the walls. I had a crew that would help me, and this crew was some folks I used to work with at my general contractor world, where they either are in retirement or kind of doing their own thing. And so they came out on Saturdays during my pours to help me. Well, they were the A team, and for some reason the A team couldn't show up, and I had the D team, which was a friend of a friend of a friend. And so the way it works is as you're filling the wall, you can't just fill it all the way to the top, or it's just going to explode from the pressure. And this team was used to commercial construction, where it's a little more burly, you can go up a little higher, faster. And they didn't believe me, and so we were wrapping around, and I was watching them like a hawk and making them keep moving, keep moving.
Mhm.
And the second I stopped watching, they filled my second floor wall way too high, and the pressure was too huge, and I just exploded the wall. And there was concrete out the side of the wall, just
Ugh.
filling the dirt outside. And um, we also had a couple trucks of concrete out in the street, and you can't just slow down, right? Concrete's this scary chemical process that it's not going to wait for you, right? So we had to keep moving elsewhere with the pump and the concrete, and by the time it got back around, we had to patch up that huge hole in the wall. And so, thankfully, this student of mine who is a very talented carpenter, he and I patched up the wall just in time for the concrete to pass through, and we eventually made it to the top of the pour. But after that, I questioned, I did call a concrete contractor and said, would you be interested to finish this house for me? The concrete structure. And he said, nope, I'm not. I would have done it back in, 3 months ago when you told me I could have the whole job, but no, I'm not going to touch it after, with just half of the job left. So that was a time where I was questioning myself for sure. And then
Well,
there were a couple others.
your vision for this sounds quite bold, right? I mean, no wood whatsoever, a steel roof. You're doing it on your own, to the point where I get it. A lot of people halfway through don't want to go and clean up somebody else's mess, but it got to the point where you were the only one who could fulfill that vision. That's a lot of responsibility, and I bet in some days it was terrifying. But how rewarding was that? How rewarding was it to just look at it, like not quite when you moved in, but like right before you moved in, you're like, wow, like I did this thing.
It's incredibly rewarding. It's not like a little tiny shed either. It's a full house, right? And so I'm happy with the work that we did, myself and these students, and actually several volunteers, family and friends came out. When I say I built it, clearly I didn't do it by myself. And so
Mhm.
this team of volunteers and helpers, yeah, it's cool. It's cool to say, we did that.
Okay. So I told you that I recorded an intro without you. And one of the things I was talking about is how interested I was in both the journey and the destination. The journey sounds incredible, what you were able to do on your own, but the destination is this dream that we all have. I don't want to speak for everybody. I can speak for me. Every waking hour, I think about what it's going to be like to finally have a new home and have all of this behind me. What was move-in day like for you? No wrong answer, but just let me hear what it's like.
It's wonderful. It really is. I mean, it's such a grind. It's such a struggle to get to that day that it just feels like there's this enormous weight off your shoulders. We were smiling for days straight. It happened to be right before Christmas time, and so also a fun time any ordinary year. But to also move in, of course, we're having to buy new trinkets and ornaments and stuff that have no sentimental value. But anyway, we still enjoy. We really enjoyed the holiday season, moving in, being together, having our own place. We lived in 5 homes before, as I know many of you will be in that realm of moving around. It was amazing. It was amazing, and there was more joy even before that. And I'm hoping I can maybe give some of your listeners some hope
Yeah.
with that too. So right now I understand some of you are really close to getting your lots cleared, and I know you did earlier this week or last week.
Yeah,
Um,
this week.
that's the first big piece where it was Armageddon before. It looks like a war zone, a horrible place to go
Mhm.
look at. It reeks of toxic, who knows what. And then once it gets cleared, you get that first glimpse of some joy, some progress, some hope. And maybe the next thing would be when you start to design your house, like you mentioned. You're starting to
Mhm.
look at what are the possibilities. And I found joy in that. And then sometime soon you're going to break ground, and that's a huge time. And then you see the shape of this house coming up, and then at some point you're walking through, and this is your kid's room, and this is going to be the view out the kitchen window. That's fun too. And of course the culmination of all of it is you open that front door after you get your certificate of occupancy, and you're back home. And so there's some joy to come, even though I know you're all getting your driver's license and passport and trying to find ways to get your kids to school. And Oh, I know it's horrible, but there's some enjoyment coming up.
Yeah, my lot was cleared recently, and it's kind of like going from that war zone to a blank canvas, right? They finalized it on Monday. I've been there 6 out of the 7 days, the last 7 days, just walking around. And you're just like looking at things, but it's that blank canvas. It's that starting over, right? So it's that first part, and I try to find the joy as well, and the design and looking at Pinterest and in my mind, my strategy is I'm going to build Camelot, and then I'm going to figure out. I'm going to design Camelot, I should say. Then somebody's going to tell me how much Camelot costs, and then I'm going to need an itemized budget, and then I'm going to figure out what I really care about.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And how
But
about your family? Did your family get some joy seeing the lot cleared?
yeah, yeah, it was one of those things. Anna said, she's like, "This is going to be really hard for me because once it's gone, like it's gone." And I was like, that's an issue that we all deal with, is like just we all deal with things differently. We're on different timelines and paths, and I was just like, clear it as fast as possible. Like I don't want to see the ruins of what was. I want to see the possibilities of what can be next.
Mhm.
And luckily it was really cool. I actually snuck my son over there this morning right before we got to school. He hadn't seen it completely cleared yet, and it was just kind of like you're just like looking at one. You never imagine your lot was that big. No matter how big your lot actually is, it looks 10 times bigger when there's nothing on it. and,
Right, right. Yeah, yeah.
and then you just kind of start seeing it, and you just start kind of figuring out where you want to put things. So what about you? How did your family react when they finally got to go back to their home?
Yeah, it was a momentous time. So, one piece that I underestimated was how hard it was going to be on my family at the rental house, one town over, where
Mhm.
I was working 12 to 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. My wife was essentially a single mom for about 15 months. So it was hard on the family, very hard on the family. And when I came home, I was done. I was going to bed and waking up at 4 a.m. the next day.
Mhm.
So that move in meant that was ending. That we were a
Mhm.
family again. I could contribute, whatever I can contribute to the family, and there was going to be less stress, and it was huge. I mean, not just for me, but for everybody. We were back home.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I keep trying to tell my colleagues at work. It's like on my best day, I'm like 65%. I think I can get up to like 85, 90% in the next 3 months. And it's not even the emotional toll. It's just we only have so much we can deal with in our brains, right? And there's so many things that you have to do after something like this, across insurance, architects, permits. That's that's just the tip of the iceberg. So it's I'm I hear that, and there's an excitement I feel like I'd like to get where I'm not having to think about this all the time, uh, and be dad and run a company, right? Like it's going to be great to, yeah, I didn't even think about that component, just to have that mental burden off and feel like yourself. And we take for granted how much of, like, when you're at home, how much that kind of just levels your foundation of who you can be, right? Because it's a safety space.
Yeah, I mean, you and everyone else, you're kind of running on adrenaline now, and you will until that time, until you move in, and then it you truly feel the difference where we did it. We're back.
So I know there's that awesome hot tub that you guys must enjoy on a nice cold night. But what are some, like, the little things that you realized once you came back? Like, gosh, I miss just doing this little thing in my own home.
Yeah, I mean, we put in a few fun things that we say quite often. We're so glad we did that. This new house is cool. For example, heated floors.
Mm.
We every floor is heated, and we've got that concrete floor, so it stays warm all day. Walking around in your bare feet, it's just awesome, and we've never had that before. a heated towel rack. I mean, who knew how awesome that would
Ooh.
be? Yeah, and just the functionality, like that light switch belongs there, and I put it there, and it works, and I don't have to fumble for it, and the door swings this way instead of that way. It's those little things that they may seem trivial, but it makes the house really functional and easy, and yeah, and, I mean, then there's some bigger things like when the wind blows, this
Mhm.
concrete house doesn't sway in the breeze like the old wood house does. We're not getting seasick in the house anymore. And it's not loud. It's not, it sounded like a jet engine before, and now it's nice and quiet and comfortable. And when that wind's blowing, I walk across the hall and I peek in, and my daughters are sleeping, and they're not nervous. And so, there's so many things that we're happy about, and that's just a few of them.
Wow, that's really cool. That's solace, and it's funny. I've talked with my architect, and I don't know exactly all the materials. We're still working on the layout, but I'll get like, well, wait, are we sure we want to use wood? And she's like, well, you just have like you have a little bit of PTSD from just what happened. Like, I don't know if it's going to happen again. And I think what you bring up is a really good point because yeah, the logical part of my brain doesn't think that we're going to get hit at another massive wildfire in our lifetime. I hope to not be wrong on that. But yeah, when the wind blows and the kids, how they go, because my 11-year-old, he'll say that from time to time. He'll be like, "Ooh, windy day, huh? Remember when it was really windy the day before the fire?" Like, yeah, that's gonna always be stuck with us. And I think there is some emotion. There must be such an emotional relief in just being like, I don't know which way the winds are going to blow. Literally, I don't know what they're going to blow into the neighborhood. But now we're not going to have to do whatever we did last time, regardless. And so they're asleep and we're okay. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for someone who didn't experience the fire, sure, the probability is that it's not gonna, but you didn't live through this, and there's some deep-seated stuff there that it's going to take a while to go away, and if I can help reduce that for my kids and my wife, I'm going to do it.
Okay, so one of the things I ask all my neighbors, especially the ones that are more doom and gloomy that I want to try and bring up, is I always say, what is one thing you want in your new house? And you've told me about a lot of them. Was there one thing that was like the number one, like heated floors? We're doing heated floors. That's a non-negotiable factor. We are doing that. Was that your number one? Like I have to have this in my house, and if not, what was?
It's funny you ask. We lived in the original home for about 16 years or something like that, and we had one sink. We had the smallest bathroom off of our bedroom, and all this stuff sounds so trivial, but you know we needed two sinks. No matter what, I will get rid of anything else as long as we have two sinks and I don't have to share toothbrush space with you. And we got two sinks, and it's been incredible.
That's awesome, and I totally agree. I was like, I don't know if that's a big deal, and I was told that is a massive deal, and we will definitely be doing the two sinks. Uh,
Oh,
but
the other thing is the
yeah,
laundry room. California, I think, is a lot of ranches, right? Or at least two
mhm.
story. We always had the laundry in the basement in all the houses around here. We put the laundry next to the bedrooms on the second floor, and that's been a game changer.
Nice, nice. I think that's really cool. And one of the things I'm kind of thinking of now is like after the fire, I felt like my community, like everything, like if before the fire, if you asked me what I liked and what I didn't like, it probably would have been really easy to rattle off the little things I didn't like, and then all of a sudden you got kind of defensive, like, no, this is the best place ever. um, and I didn't really get that way with my house because I felt like my house was kind of a starter house, but I know others who are just like, because our houses were built in like the 1920s, 1930s. There was a lot of vintage and charm to them, and the kind of things that you're never going to get back. uh, at any point along the way, were you able to go from like, oh gosh, I miss this old house, to like, hey, wait, maybe it wasn't perfect, and there's some cool new things we can do with it.
If you ignore the whole horrible fire piece, I didn't love our old house. It was also a starter house. It was built with 2x4s, and the construction quality was horrendous. And When the wind blew, we actually got dirt blowing through our house. I mean, so from an engineer construction guy's perspective, it was atrocious. Of course, there's all the memories. Of course, all that stuff I miss. But the house itself, this house is light years better. And anyone, even you don't have to build a concrete house from 1920s till now. 100 years, codes change. So many things have changed that objectively your new house is going to be better no matter what, even if you try to build the exact same thing you have. So yeah, I was totally on board with building this new thing and making it better because yeah, I don't miss the quality of that old one.
Yeah, that's cool. And I wonder if there's something regional about that. I talked about this with your colleague Abby last week, in that like we weren't really ever expecting to rebuild. Nobody builds new construction here unless they have the money to buy a old dilapidated or what their version of a dilapidated house, knock it down to two walls, and then build on top of it. So the idea, like I think people are having a hard time wrapping their heads around how great new construction, more disaster resilient design. Everyone's required to have solar, everyone's required to have sprinklers, and it's going to just look really new and nice, which we're not used to. And I think that's going to be a little bit of a neighborhood shock. We've got another year and a half to to get there, but it's cool to hear that experience of like, no, once everything is new and the neighborhood's new, like that feels really good.
Yeah, I think you're gonna miss the charm of those old houses. My house was built in 1999, so there's nothing special about it. But beyond the charm of it, yeah, I mean, it's going to be so tight. The air quality is going to be better. The energy efficiency is going to be better. When it comes to those things, I think you're going to be quite happy.
And what about your relationship with your neighbors? Because I feel like my neighbors and I have like we've gotten so much closer, and I was kind of embarrassed at how many people I didn't really know until this. What's the community like now that you guys are all back moved in?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. We had the same experience where, and I was embarrassed too. There was some people across the street I didn't even know who they were. Um, but yeah, you get pretty tight pretty fast, and we actually as a community worked together to build back as fast as we could in mass at scale. And so through that effort too, we grew as a community. So now kids are playing out in the street again, people are laughing, and so if that gives you hope, that's in the future. And you walk down the street and you can't go to the mailbox without losing 20 minutes of your day because now everybody and everyone wants to talk about whatever the normal life things are now, but now we're tight. So that's been really fun and something I of course didn't expect when it first happened.
Wow. No, that's really cool, and it's neat to hear about how that community comes together. Now, you said that you guys put together a lot of materials and were able to buy things in mass. This is something that I feel a lot of community groups are talking about, but it's a little bit more splintered. How did you guys do it? And when you're talking about like coming together, how many homes are we talking about?
Just over 170 homes in our neighborhood, and what we did was we as a neighborhood drafted a request for proposal. Basically, we sent out a shot in the dark to a bunch of developers, builders, and said, "How many homes can you build? How fast? What's the price?" And after 20 or so builders responded, we narrowed it down to about three, and they came up with floor plans, prices, some options, and then homeowners just started signing up. So there's some compromise there, right? You're
Mhm.
going to get one of four or five homes floor plans. It's not going to be the exact home you want. It's going to go fast though. It's going to be less expensive, and so depending on what's important to you,
Mhm.
most of my neighbors wanted to get back fast, and they were willing to compromise on some of the unique custom aspects of their home. And so it was a good solution for my neighborhood. And I know that's not true. Some folks want to do the custom home build, and they still did in our neighborhood, but most of them did the
Mhm.
production build.
Yeah, and I think it's great that they have the option. We currently have a group that's trying to get a bunch of pre-approved permits for a handful of different designs. And I get in that thing because we have a funky neighborhood. Like everybody's very individualistic. There's all sorts of different types of homes, and I'm really excited kind of about the creativity that could come out of this. But like you said, like not everyone's story is the same. A lot of people are underinsured, and I just want whoever was there and went through the disaster to be able to get back however it makes the most sense for them. There'll be enough crazy custom homes. I'm not too worried about that. But I do love that option exists, and it sounds like you guys did a really good job of organizing that. I think we've had a lot of nonprofit support, or I should say nonprofit, just volunteered architects coming together to offer these things, to work with our county to hopefully expedite the permitting process for these homes. And then I'm sure getting the right builders and the right RFPs out to them is probably the next step.
Yeah, there's been a few folks who we've tried to pass on some lessons learned to out in Altadena in particular. Altadena Collective is doing something like that out there, and I'm sure there's several others. But yeah, it gives folks a good option if they want more of the easy button with all the other things going on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So for our listeners, our community members, like we're at the beginning of this journey. Um, if anyone here feels stuck or lost or overwhelmed with all of this idea of a rebuild, and don't worry, you guys, you don't have to build a concrete home that is zero energy, as cool as Matt did. But if you're just feeling frustrated, because we're at the beginning, what do you want them to hear from your story, and what do you want them to know about the road ahead?
Yeah, it as you all know, it's a grind. It is an absolute grind, and there is little fun in in most of this. Um, but it's like climbing Everest, right? One step ahead of the other, 1 foot ahead of the other, you'll get there. And the old saying, "This too shall pass." This too shall pass.
Mhm.
I'm not sure I would have believed you. I may have got mad at you if you said that to me right after the fire, but totally true. Totally true. I'm Kids are laughing, bouncing on trampolines out in the yard, and um, just don't give up. Move deliberately, maybe not recklessly fast, but move quickly because money money runs out with that ALE, um, and before you know it, you're going to look back and it's going to be a distant memory. I don't know how many times I've said that to people. They ask, "How's it going? Is it pretty traumatic still with the whole fire?" That feels like a lifetime ago, quite honestly, with everything we've gone through. And I hope the same for you. I hope you look back and you just think that was just a horrible blip in time. Now we're in a wonderful new community, and this too passed.
Yeah, I kind of try and use the parallel of the pandemic, right? That seems so far in the past, but especially where we were literally locked in for a year. So we've gone through hard times before. We'll go through hard times again in the future. It's more that feeling where like I know things are going to be good, but can I just like go to bed one night and then wake up a year and a half later and we're like there, right?
Right.
But I suppose we got to earn that, which is probably part of why the experience of moving back home was so amazing for you, because you have to go through that process. You got to go through it all, and if you want to get the gold at the end of the rainbow, you got to walk the long trail to get it. All right, last question. Matt Morris, you've gone through it all. You're happy on the other side, but man, there's probably some things you would have changed if you could have done it differently. So if you can go back and tell yourself one thing at the start of this journey, and maybe it was this too shall pass, but even if nobody's ready to hear it, what's one thing you would have told yourself to make it each day a little bit better?
I would have told myself, you're making the right choice. I chose a path that was different than everyone in my neighborhood, and I would have told myself, you're making the right choice for me personally, professionally, for my family. And I told you throughout the last 50 minutes about how it was hard. It was hard on everybody, including my family and my kids. Um, but we made the right choice. I asked them quite often, you know, what do you think? That was hard, but what do you think? And they're happy to be in this new house. Of course, they miss some things, especially the mementos, the photos, the videos. Um, but they're also more resilient. And I'm thinking about my kids in particular. You just said you got to go through and earn it, right? The next year and a half, they earned it too, and things that are going to be, maybe hard for their peers who didn't go through this, it's going to be trivial for them. Like this is the real deal, and they made it through to the other side. And so if you look at it that way, um, everyone's going to be better for it, and more resilient in so many ways. So yeah, I think I'm going to tell myself, you're making the right choice. Just push.
All right. Well, I'm going to go and I'm going to reference that 6 months from now when my permit is just stuck and it's not moving anywhere and I can't break ground and I'm frustrated. And you know what? I'm going to go listen to the end of that episode with Matt Morris because I know it's going to be today might be a tough day, but I think we're all on the right path. So, Matt, thank you so much for sharing your story. This was amazing.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you, and I hope the best for you, for your family, for all your listeners. And yeah, just push, and there'll be a time where, again, it feels like a memory. So we're thinking about you all.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt.
Thanks, Austin.